Hello and welcome back to EPG Pathshala. We are now going to discuss the third of the 4 modules on the work of human rights NGOs. In the first module, we had an overview of the work of NGOs which work on human rights, and in the second module, we did a case study of 3 international organizations, namely Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch and the International Committee of the Red Cross, which is called ICRC. Though these are 3 renowned organizations, there are many more international and regional human rights organizations that use a variety of human rights strategies, and they work on varied human rights issues, and they also work with different sets of stakeholders. Indeed, the world of NGOs is colorful and diverse with multiple players and approaches to human rights. This present module introduces you to another set of issues, that is another international NGOs, other regional human rights organizations, as well as it traces the linkage of such international and regional NGOs to the system of United Nations, which works on protecting and promoting human rights across the world. The learning outcomes of this module are, firstly, to gain familiarity to the work of other international NGOs. Secondly, to understand the work of regional human rights NGOs, particularly in the Asian and in the South Asian regions. Thirdly, to comprehend the interface between international and regional NGOs on one hand and the United Nations on the other hand in protecting human rights. Other INGOs which are prominent in protecting and promoting human rights include: number 1, Agha Khan Development Network. It is one of the largest international organizations. I am sure you have heard of it. It works on a variety of developmental issues. It builds institutions such as schools, hospitals and electricity generation plants, and it delivers essential services such as health, education and cultural development. It works in about 30 countries and employs at least 80,000 people, mostly from developing countries. AKDN, as it is called, consists of many trusts, foundations, initiatives, programs and agencies pertaining to its 3 wings. Its wings are: number 1, economic development, number 2, social development and number 3, cultural development. It works in almost all regions of the world. In South Asia particularly, AKDN works in Bangladesh, Pakistan and India. One of the other international human rights organizations is called Human Rights First. It is an American NGO based in New York, Washington and Houston. It is an independent advocacy and action organization that persuades the American government and private companies to respect human rights and rule of law and to demand reform, accountability and justice. It works around the world in places and on issues where American influence can be harnessed to secure core human rights. Third organization at the international level, International Federation for Human Rights. This is called FIDH. It is a human rights NGO which is a federation of 178 organizations from 120 countries across the world. Since 1922, FIDH has been protecting and promoting civil, political, social, economic and cultural rights by reinforcing the capacities of its local actors and strengthening their human rights work and influence. It is the second oldest INGO after Anti-Slavery International, and it has its headquarters in Paris, France. Fourth international NGO which I would like to introduce you to is called Lawyers Committee on Human Rights. The short form for this is LCHR. LCHR is a voluntary professional organization that respects, promotes and protects respect for legal protections in international human rights standards. In collaboration with the Reebok Foundation, LCHR initiated what is known as the Witness Program, through which multimedia tools such as video cameras and camcorders were given to human rights defenders across the world to document violations of human rights as and when they take place. This organization provides legal aid and is involved in advocacy and documentation. This NGO has a New York and a Washington office. A fifth international NGO which is very prominent is called Médecins Sans Frontières. In English, this is called Doctors Without Borders. It is an important and independent international medical humanitarian organization that provides emergency medical aid in over 65 countries to victims of armed conflict, epidemics, natural or human-made disasters, and to those who are excluded from healthcare. Medical MSF, as it is called, has been active in India, providing medical aid and assisting the government in setting up health centers in many parts of India, such as Chhattisgarh, Bihar, Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, Manipur, Meghalaya, Nagaland, Tripura and Kashmir. A sixth international NGO which I would like to introduce you to is called Parliamentarians for Global Action, called in short as PGA. PGA is an international NGO consisting of a network of committed legislators across the world. It mobilizes, informs and motivates parliamentarians in all parts of the world to promote human rights and rule of law, justice and accountability. Its work focuses on issues of international law and human rights, peace and democracy, and gender equality. Currently, its members consist of over 1,300 legislators from across 145 elected parliaments around the world. PGA has been working closely with intergovernmental organizations such as UNFPA, UNDP, UNICEF, UN Women, the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank. A seventh international NGO that I would like to make a mention of is WaterAid. WaterAid is an international NGO established in 1981 with the objectives of bringing water, sanitation and hygiene education where it is needed most among the poorest of the poor and the most marginalized. It provides water, sanitation and hygiene services to women, disabled people as well as other marginalized groups. It advocates toilets that cater to people on wheelchair, and it also promotes and advocates menstrual hygiene, and it works with governments to to develop national strategies to make water, sanitation and hygiene services accessible to all. WaterAid works in 37 countries, including India. Now, let us have an overview of regional human rights NGOs. Till now, we were discussing some of the international human rights NGOs. Now, we will focus a little more on regional human rights NGOs, particularly those in the Asian and South Asian region, because those are very relevant for the kind of human rights issues that we have in India. Regional human rights NGOs are, in a sense, international NGOs. While their work is similar to that of INGOs, they have a focus on a particular region of the world. Membership of regional human rights NGOs is characterized by boundaries and demarcations that are confined to a particular geographical region in the world. Although they are referred to often as INGOs, this module we will be using the term regional human rights NGOs to emphasize the region-specific focus of their work. Regional human rights NGOs have become very prominent in today's world for a number of reasons. What are these reasons? Number one, there is a need to have a focus and specialized work on human rights issues that are specific to a particular region of the world. For example, female genital mutilation in the African region and caste-based discrimination in the South Asian region. Number two, neighboring countries are often interdependent on each other, as human rights offenders and victims may be across the border. Illegal arms and weapons trade, drug trafficking and human trafficking are some human rights violations and crimes that are transnational in nature. That is, they are crimes that work across national borders, but within a particular region. Regional cooperation can strengthen the effort towards justice and accountability. A third reason for the prominence of regional human rights organizations is that there are similarities in legal systems, shared legal and political history, reduced cultural and linguistic barriers, and strengthened sense of solidarity among people of countries in a particular region. These can contribute to strengthening the human rights record in that particular region. A fourth reason is that regional and sub-regional NGOs have deeper knowledge, political insights, and stronger local networks that increase the potential for long-lasting peace and sustainability of protection and promotion of human rights. A fifth reason why regional NGOs are becoming very prominent is that dialoguing with governments and advocacy initiatives often gain more legitimacy when the players who are involved are regional in nature. A sixth reason, regional NGOs have a far greater vested interest in resolving conflicts and upholding rule of law and human rights. Seventh reason, human rights initiatives taken by regional NGOs are logistically more viable, cost-effective, and less time-consuming due to proximity and also due to social and political familiarity with the human rights situation in the region. Now, let us discuss briefly the profiles of a few regional human rights NGOs and understand or gain familiarity to their work. First, Asian Forum for Human Rights and Development. This particular NGO is called in short as Forum Asia. I am sure you have heard of Forum Asia. Forum Asia is one of the oldest and most reputed regional human rights NGO which operates in the Asian region. Based in Bangkok, Forum Asia is a membership-based organization which was founded in 1991. It currently has more than 46 member organizations from across 17 countries in Asia, which includes India. It undertakes advocacy initiatives with SAARC, with United Nations, with ASEAN, as well as national human rights institutions. Its focus areas include human rights defenders, civil and political rights, economic, social and cultural rights, right to development and sedition. Its work on human rights defenders is noteworthy. Forum Asia, through its program on human rights defenders, has sought to provide a measure of protection to human rights defenders and particularly women human rights defenders so that they can carry forward their work on human rights in a more conducive, enabling and less threatening environment. It initiates campaigns for the release of human rights defenders who have been harassed, targeted or detained illegally and works for accountability in situations where human rights defenders are killed due to their human rights work. It also engages in a dialogue with governments, advocates and influences the formulation of law and policy in this regard, conducts trainings to create awareness about international human rights standards related to human rights defenders and documents and publishes the work and threats faced by human rights defenders. Another commendable effort of Forum Asia is its work in monitoring the work of national human rights institutions called NHRIs and to ensure that they operate in an enabling environment through which they can fulfill their mandate. Forum Asia has undertaken this initiative by establishing an Asian NGO network on national human rights institutions. This is called ANNI, ANI. ANI consists of Asian NGOs and human rights defenders. Currently, 30 members from 17 Asian countries which work towards strengthening the work of NHRIs, that is National Human Rights Institutions, in their respective countries. Another regional human rights NGO is Asian Human Rights Commission called AHRC. AHRC was founded in 1986 by a group of jurists and human rights activists in Asia with the aim of promoting greater awareness and realization of human rights in the Asian region. The Hong Kong-based NGO engages in focused work on civil and political rights such as right against torture, enforced disappearances, extrajudicial killings, illegal arrests and detention, police violence and negligence, police reform, prison conditions, death penalty and so on in Asian countries. Though traditionally its focus has been on civil and political rights, in recent times it has also addressed issues of economic, social and cultural rights such as violence against women, judicial independence, human trafficking, freedom of movement and residence and human rights defenders. It has initiated and sustained campaigns on human rights in a variety of countries in Asia such as Bangladesh, Cambodia, India, Indonesia, Myanmar, Nepal, Pakistan, Philippines, Sri Lanka, South Korea and Thailand. AHRC has consistently and successfully used the urgent appeal strategy. Whenever it receives information about violation of human rights of an individual or of a group, such as torture or illegal detention, and the person's life is in danger, and there is an urgent intervention which is warranted, it writes an urgent appeal letter to the concerned government. Additionally, it disseminates a model letter to all its members and supporters across several countries, urging them to write to the authorities too. The urgent action letter campaign has, in many cases, pressurized the authorities into releasing the victim or safeguarding his or her human rights. A third regional human rights NGO is South Asian Forum for Human Rights, called SAFHR, SAFHR. SAFHR is a regional forum established in 1990 for promotion of peace, democracy and human rights, and for understanding the linkages between the three. Its headquarters was formerly in Kathmandu and is now in Delhi. It works on issues such as displacement of indigenous peoples and minorities, refugees and migrants, impunity, interstate and intrastate conflicts and peace accords, militarization and the strengthening of peace constituencies in civil society. Working through a network of 40 partner organizations and associates that promote human rights and peace, SAFHR facilitates regional dialogues and conducts peace audits, peace studies courses, training workshops, publications and advocacy campaigns. Its flagship program is the Human Rights and Peace Studies Orientation course. Started in 2001, the course combines distance education with a face-to-face orientation course where about 25 participants are selected from across the South Asian countries, and they are trained in issues of human rights, justice and peace in South Asia. The course contents and curriculum are continuously evolving and are modified to suit current contexts. One of the innovative strategies employed by SAFHR is to conduct what is called peace audits. These are primarily audits conducted by the NGO to monitor the inclusion of women, inclusion of minorities, refugees and other marginalized communities into peace processes, and to examine if the peace processes followed by the concerned governments adhere to international human rights standards and the standards of humanitarian law. The peace audits are conducted by people at the margins. Since its inception in 1990, SAFHR has conducted sound research and produced publications to disseminate findings and create visibility on a number of human rights issues that are pertinent to South Asian countries. Yet another regional human rights NGO is South Asians for Human Rights, called SAHR, SAHR. SAHR is also a regional network in South Asia, as in the case of SAFHR. SAHR commenced a decade after SAFHR in 2000. SAHR is a voluntary, democratic people's organization consisting of a large membership base of people who are committed to addressing issues pertaining to the human rights and at the national and regional levels. SAHR has both institutional and individual members. SAHR's secretariat is located in Colombo in Sri Lanka. SAHR promotes peace, democracy, secularism, human security, pluralism in approaches towards development of different communities, ethnic, linguistic, religious as well as other groups. It monitors human rights violations, reviews laws and policies and practices that have adverse consequences on human rights, and conducts campaigns and programs on major human rights issues in the South Asia region. Afghanistan, Bangladesh, India, Maldives, Nepal, Pakistan, Sri Lanka. These are all countries where it conducts its activities. While the focus of SAFAR is on minorities, refugees, displacement, border areas and peace dialogues, the focus of SEHER is on other human rights issues such as 1. Addressing and monitoring and highlighting grave human rights violations such as torture and enforced disappearances. 2. Standard setting for parliamentary and electoral processes in South Asia. 3. It engages with SAARC and strengthens citizens' voices for SAARC to pay more attention to human rights issues in the region as opposed to a focus only on trade, economy and development. SAFAR aims at dialoguing with South Asian governments to adopt human rights as an area for cooperation among SAARC countries. 4th, it promotes, protects and ensures the enforcement of social, economic and cultural rights of the people, particularly that of marginalized communities. 5th, it works on integrating a gender perspective and aspects of women's empowerment issues into those of peace and security, and in inclusion and participation of women in dialogues on peace and security. SEHER's strength lies in its fact-finding missions, research and publication, which highlight human rights perspectives in relation to many issues in the South Asian region. Let us now try and understand regional NGOs and civil society's efforts in establishing a regional human rights mechanism for South Asia. South Asian region has been grappling with grave human rights violations for several decades. South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, called SAARC, S-A-A-R-C, SAARC, commenced in 1985 to promote the well-being of people all over South Asia through economic and cultural cooperation. Although SAARC addressed issues pertaining to women and children, such as through the SAARC Convention on Preventing and Combating Trafficking in Women and Children for Prostitution, SAARC has not adopted a specific human rights convention, and it has not moved towards establishing a human rights mechanism for South Asian countries. Regional human rights mechanisms have been developed in other parts of the world to reflect regional values and to offer a more specific, accessible framework other than the United Nations. The European, Inter-American and African human rights systems are examples of such efforts. Regional NGOs in Asia and particularly in South Asia have worked for decades in establishing a similar regional human rights mechanism for South Asia. Most of the SAARC countries have common problems and problems that cut across the borders. So, crimes which are transnational in nature, such as trafficking, internal displacement, forced migration, refugees, torture, death penalty, extrajudicial killings, violence against women, eviction and destitution, loss of livelihood and forest lands, etc. The effort of NGOs and civil society actors has been to try and bring the national human rights institutions as well as SARC members on one common platform for a consensus on establishing a regional human rights mechanism. Working towards establishing of a human rights mechanism for South Asia is a long and arduous journey. The human rights NGOs involved in this process have been cautious to ensure that such a regional human rights mechanism conforms to established human rights standards and laws. In the last part of this module, let us look at international human rights NGOs and their interface with the United Nations. Although international human rights NGOs have existed for centuries, their presence and importance came to be acknowledged since mid-19th century. The League of Nations, the predecessor of the United Nations, had accepted and consulted NGOs and allowed them to participate in its meetings and committees. When the United Nations was created in 1945, this legacy continued, and Article 71 of the UN Charter was formulated to pave way for the interface of the United Nations with NGOs. This particular article calls upon ECOSOC to make suitable arrangements in consultation with NGOs. Through Article 71, NGOs can now have a consultative status with the Economic and Social Council, which is called ECOSOC. It is a principal organ of the United Nations. ECOSOC is mandated to consult with NGOs on matters that concern it. This provision opened the doors for more than 3,500 NGOs worldwide to apply and obtain the consultative status today. It has also paved way for the UN to identify new modalities for promoting increased and strategic participation of NGOs. The ECOSOC provides three categories of consultative status to NGOs. These are: first category general, which is the highest level; second category, which is special status, which is granted to NGOs working on a few fields of that are actively addressed by the ECOSOC, and the third status is roster status, which is given to NGOs that may make occasional and useful contributions to ECOSOC's work. The consultative status of NGOs with ECOSOC benefits both the UN and the NGOs, and hence it is a win-win situation. Prominent INGOs with an NGO consultative status with ECOSOC include Amnesty International, Forum Asia, Human Rights Watch, FIDH, International Commission of Jurists, Minority Rights Group International, the Anti-Slavery Society, Lawyers Committee for Human Rights, and Parliamentarians for Global Action. We have already discussed a few of these NGOs earlier today in this module. NGOs have played an important role in preparing and presenting alternatives and shadow reports before the UN treaty bodies in this regard. Additionally, they have facilitated accountability of the governments in the Universal Periodic Review that is carried out every 4 years. In conclusion, in this module, we have discussed the important work of other international NGOs working on human rights and discussed the work of 4 regional NGOs working on protection and promotion of human rights in the Asian and South Asian region. As a demonstration of their work, the case study of efforts at establishing a regional human rights mechanism for South Asia has also been discussed. In the last segment, we have tried to understand the contribution made by NGOs to the work of United Nations and the modalities by which the role of NGOs in the United Nations is established. Needless to say, as in the case of the other modules, this module 2 is not exhaustive but is meant to give you an overview. Please read the notes as well as the web links and other references for additional readings given for module 3 in your notes, so that you can gain a deeper understanding of the issues discussed in this module. With that, we come to an end of module 3. Thank you.